It's now time to look at how pathogens actually are able to enter into our bodies and the adaptations that they have developed to be able to live and survive and spread on to more people. So, our learning intention for today is to be able to describe the adaptations of pathogens that facilitate their entry into cells, tissues, and hosts. Um, so, the different pathogen entry points, of course, through, open surfaces in our body. So, some obvious ones are our eyes, our mouth, nose, our urogenital openings, as well as breaches of the skin barrier. So, I'm talking about if you have like a cut on your skin, or even things created from insect bites, so mosquitoes, fleas, even some flies have a habit of biting as well. So then that causes an open wound that allows pathogens to get into. So, as I said before in my previous videos about how a successful pathogen needs to be able to evade the host's immune system to survive, this is actually a bit more crucial than others, particularly things or pathogens such as viruses who require a host cell to be able to reproduce. So, of course, pathogens may need to also be within a particular region in your body. So, maybe they have to get to your intestines because they need the resources that are there, um, or they need to be able to access particular cells, so such as white blood cells, to replicate or complete their life cycle. So, HIV is a good example. They are, in fact, a virus that needs to get into your white blood cells to be able to reproduce. So, like I said before, for viruses, this is of particular importance for them. They need to be able to enter a host to take control of the replication and protein synthesis machinery because this is actually what is able to transcribe and translate their DNA or their little nucleic acid genome that needs doing. And this is, in fact, the only way that viruses can replicate. So they very much so need a host cell to survive. So because of this, and because of all the different ways that we are trying to stop viruses and pathogens from entering our body, um, the pathogens themselves have evolved adaptations over time to help them evade host immune responses as well as other external factors such as antibiotics. So for our good old virus, they actually have the ability to change the outside capsid, wherein lies something called antigens. So I will go further into detail about antigens in a later video. But for now, all you need to know is that antigens are just a way for your body's immune system to be able to recognize itself from foreign um, particles. So, of course, a virus in this case would be a foreign particle. So, what happens is that your immune system has particular antibodies that can combine to specific antigens. So, as soon as the immune system finds that, hang on a second, I don't recognize these antigen, so I need to be able to create an antibody for this specific antigen. What happens is in that time, the virus may have mutated itself or changed itself and caused it so that the antigen no longer matches with that antibody and they are unfortunately unable to neutralize them. So that is a way that viruses and in particular HIV evades the white blood cells in our immune system. For bacteria, it is common for them to have pili to allow them to attach to surfaces. So don't think of surfaces in terms of like the tabletop or like a screen or a wall. Also think about like the surfaces on your body as well, right? Your skin, the inner lining of like your intestines or the inner lining of like your stomach or everything else. They also count as surfaces, right? So, when our immune system prompts us to sneeze or cough or use other bodily fluids to try and expel them, these guys can actually hold on using their pili. And you can actually see it in this picture there. This is these little tubes that you can see coming out of this rod-shaped bacteria here. So, as you know, when we talked about being able to help stop the spread of disease, we can take things such as like antibiotics and antifungals, which can help in, again, either reducing the growth of or killing off the bacteria. But unfortunately, our bacteria have found ways to fight back through resistance mechanisms. So they are not only then being resistant to people, but they are in fact also getting resistant to antibiotics themselves. And they've been able to do that in a number of different ways. So the first one is maybe an antibiotic is looking to target a specific resource or enzyme or substrate that the bacteria needs. And what happens is that the bacteria says, well, okay, I'm not actually just going to use that resource. So they just avoid using the target in which that antibiotic is targeting. The next thing they might do is when the antibiotic is able to enter into the bacteria, it says, well, hang on a sec, I've actually got enzymes here to help break down this drug and prevent it from going any further and reaching that target that the bacteria is trying to get. Another method is that the bacteria will actually limit the number of ways that the antibiotic is able to enter into the bacteria. Okay, so think about how on the outside of our bacteria there are cellular receptors, and pretty much the bacteria is saying, nah, you are not compatible with my cellular receptor, so I'm not going to let you to come in. Um, Coming back down around here now, another way that it can happen is to actually have these pumps. Don't think of an actual pump, but they've got pumps to just expel the antibiotic back out of it, and they just go, no, access denied, goodbye, and then pump it back out. And then lastly, another way that the bacteria can also prevent antibiotics from working on them is to actually change the target itself, right? So antibiotics, they are trying to maybe fit into an enzyme and kind of cause it to take up all of available enzyme spots so that it can't actually do its normal functions, but maybe the bacteria has now changed the shape of the enzyme so that it can no longer fit into that enzyme anymore, and so then it's prevented that antibiotic from doing its job. So, one really key thing to think about when we are talking about antibiotic resistance is that a germ just doesn't suddenly think, oh, I'm getting attacked by antibiotics, I'm just going to change. It does not work like that. So, what really happens is that we know bacteria can multiply really, really quickly through binary fission. So, having a look at this first circle here, so maybe you're really sick and you're taking some antibiotics, and there's like one germ in there out of all of them that just happens to have a gene mutation that makes it resistant to that antibiotic. So what happens then is that it kills all the other bacteria that aren't resistant to the drug, and now you have one surviving bacterium. And then this one then passes its genes down through binary fission, so it's pretty much an exact replica of itself. And because it's an exact replica of itself, it has the same gene now that's making it resistant to the antibiotic. So now this bacteria is able to take over, okay? And so now all of these millions of bacteria are now resistant to that antibiotic. Of course, another way to spread drug resistance or antibiotic resistance is by bacteria actually imparting genetic coding or plasmids, which you will learn more about in other biology topics, but they actually pass on the genetic information of how to be drug resistant to other bacteria. So it's just really important to think, right? Antibiotic resistance doesn't spontaneously happen in a bacteria that just decides to be resistant. Okay, it is a process that happens. I would say over time, but bacteria do reproduce really quickly. Okay. So, unfortunately, over the years, antibiotics have been severely misused. used. And so this has now given the rise to things that we now call superbugs. And pretty much all this is we are now referring to bacteria who are resistant to all known antibiotics. So if you were to catch one of these superbugs, most likely or highly likely you would die from them, right? Because we actually have no way to treat you or anything like that. So the rise of antibiotic resistance does come from the misuse in things such as agriculture. So believe it or not, farmers actually feed their cattle and livestock antibiotics within their feed to help keep them healthy. But then this actually does increase the number of bacteria that are then drug resistant. The other thing that they do is to also spray their crops with antibiotics because, again, pathogens do also affect plants as well as humans too, though you'd have slightly different pathogens, of course, that are affecting the two different types of species, I guess you could say. Unfortunately, the other way that antibiotics are misused or misused in medicine. So I don't know if you've ever been to the doctor before and it feels like this particular doctor always just prescribes antibiotics. Well, unfortunately, if you do prescribe antibiotics to something that is actually a viral infection, you're kind of just encouraging again the rise of the resistance of bacteria who are drug resistant, right? Because remember, drug bacteria are still expelled from your body through, things such as feces and coughing and sneezing, no matter even if it is healthy bacteria, if we are healthy. And another thing that can happen in terms of incorrect use of antibiotics in medicine is that if you're someone who has been giving an antibiotics for a bacterial infection, make sure you take those antibiotics until there is nothing left. So that includes if it's in a medicine bottle and you've gotten the pink strawberry flavored medicine, or if that is through pills. Okay, you take all of it and you make sure you take all of it. Okay, because otherwise, if you don't take all of it, it will not kill all the bacteria and it will increase the chance of bacteria who are resistant to that drug arising. Okay, so that is very important things to consider when you are going to the doctors and has contributed to our pretty serious problem of having superbugs. But luckily, there are things that we are trying to do to combat antibiotic resistance, and this is through ways such as using probiotics. So, you might have heard about probiotics before, particularly when you have yogurt. And what this does is that it promotes good bacteria in the gut. This is definitely something that's still getting researched, but it is never a bad idea to have yogurt anyway because it is good for you. And as you know, bacteria, yogurt is filled with the good bacteria lactobacilli. So that is a good bacteria that resides in our gut and does help us to digest dairy. So what the theory behind this is that there, if there is more competition for resources, then there is a less chance of infection by pathogens, right? Because you've got more good bacteria battling for resources in your gut than you do bad bacteria. So then those pathogens might be maybe more likely to die or get overrun by the good bacteria. Another thing that has been looked into is bacteriophages. So these are viruses that only infect bacteria, and there have been many studies that have been looked at into utilizing bacteriophages to kill pathogenic bacteria. Of course, there is that little risk still of looking at, well, what if they, the bacteriophages genetically mutate and start targeting our good bacteria or even our own human cells. So there's definitely still some things to consider before um, testing bacteriophages on humans themselves. And my friend, who is a microbiologist, is actually looking into this field itself as well.